Bleach, the secret god who humbled Yhwach. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 81. Calculate? After receiving Aizen's order, Ikamaru Jin rushed to the direction of Ryatsu's explosion with the fastest speed. When he arrived not far from the Baidao gate, he began to slowly move towards his destination. However, as I followed Ikamaru Jin to not far from the White Road gate, I saw a strange and familiar figure. How could it be him? Ikamaru Jin secretly said in his heart. At this moment, a plan that was more frantic than the original one was beginning to brew in his heart. Shoot him. Shinso. Ikamaru Jin slowly pulled out his Zanpakuto, pointed the tip of the sword in the direction of the white door, and whispered. P. I saw this slender Zanpakuto. With a burst of air-breaking sound, it began to spread rapidly, and in a flash, it came to Yu Taifeng in front of 743. After seeing this scene, everyone outside the door issued a burst of exclamation. Just when Yoruchi was about to rush to block the sword for Yu Taifeng, he saw the tip of the sword stabbing against Duodenfang's body impartially. Dui Danfeng looked at the blade not far from his heart, his face was full of incredible expression. Accompanied by a huge impact, the body like a hill in Duodenfang was instantly knocked out. When his body was about to hit Ichigo and the others, Sato, who had been silent, suddenly rushed over. After he roared, he exhausted all his strength to hold down Brother Danfeng's heavy body. Sato and Xiaodanfeng flew upside down one after another, but they finally avoided everyone in a dangerous way. At this moment, the two of them were like two armor-piercing bullets, one large and one small, and they directly smashed through several houses. Boom. Boom. Along with the heavy smoke and dust, the Baidaemon was also closed heavily due to no one to lift it up. Sato. Ichigo yelled and ran towards the dusty ruins. Everyone rushed over there one after another. Ikamaru Jin squinted his eyes and smiled slightly, as if Yu Taifeng in front of him wouldn't do anything to himself. Yu Taifeng looked calmly at the guy who looked like a poisonous snake, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He doesn't bother to think about some things, but it doesn't mean he doesn't know. Read more at mtlarchive.com. Ikamaru Jin may think that only he knows his secret. However, as a traveler, Yu Taifeng naturally understands all of this clearly. However, he would never have thought that the other party would make such an act similar to provoking himself. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you? Yu Taifeng asked with a chuckle. Of course I'm afraid. Ikamaru Jin said. Then you dare to make a move? Yu Taifeng then asked. What dare not? I don't have as many auras as you do. My life is worthless, so I can only be a gambler. Ikamaru Jin said unhurriedly, as if Yu Taifeng was like an old friend who hadn't seen him for many years. After hearing these words, Yu Taifeng smiled and shook his head and said, when you helped Aizen out of trouble more than 100 years ago, the first thing you thought about was not to save him, but to kill him, right? Ikamaru Jin, who was still talking just now, slowly opened his eyes, and the iconic smile on his face disappeared. At this moment, a look of surprise slowly appeared on his face. You just wanted to irritate me and then be killed by me. When I retaliate against Aizen, it means that your contribution is worthwhile. However, you also know that Aizen is actually not reliable, you are just his pawns. Therefore, the next moment you launch an attack, you will aim the tip of the sword at Duodenfang. In this case, you will not only give Aizen an explanation, but also let me enter Seriidii. After all, in your opinion, I am a time bomb. Yu Taifeng took a step forward slightly, staring at Ikamaru Jin, and said. Ikamaru Jin took 2 steps back in panic, his face was already full of horror. He only feels that he doesn't have any secrets in front of Yu Taifeng. You don't know me. Yu Taifeng said with a smile and shook his head. In the next second, he turned into an afterimage and disappeared in place. Hand. The sword falls. I saw a wound on Ikamaru Jin's body that ran through his body, and he fell feebly in a pool of blood. The 5th Division Team House. Aizen was sitting at the table quietly practicing calligraphy, as if everything around him had nothing to do with him. Hinamori Momo stood beside Aizen without saying a word, with a happy expression on his face. Suddenly, the brush in Aizen's hand trembled slightly, and the next moment it returned to normal. This subtle movement was naturally not discovered by Wizento, and Aizen slowly put the brush in his hand on the pen holder in front of the table after writing the last word. Hinamori, please help me with the team affairs first. I have some things that I need to go out temporarily. Aizen turned and looked at Hinamori Momo in front of him, smiling and speaking in a gentle tone. Hinamori Momo looked at the man who looked like a spring breeze, and a faint red glow appeared on his face. She nodded gently and then responded, Captain Aizen, go ahead, I will definitely help you handle the team affairs. Thank you, 1.6 Hinamori, it is too much trouble for you. A trace of apology appeared on Aizen's face, he nodded slightly and then got up and left the captain's room. Hinamori Momo looked at Aizen's fading back, his eyes were full of longing, and his face crimson murmured, Captain Aizen. On the way out of the team house, Aizen stopped from time to time, smiled and nodded in response to the teammates who greeted him. When Aizen walked out of the 5th Division team house, the smile on his face disappeared. I saw him staring in the direction of Beidaemon coldly, turning into an afterimage and disappearing in place. Yu Taifeng looked at Ikamaru Jin in a pool of blood coldly, the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, showing a smile of satisfaction. Episode 82. Help? Ding. The box around the host is detected. Is the host turned on? The system prompt sounded in Yu Taifeng's mind. He looked at Ikamaru Jin's body in a pool of blood, smiled and responded, turn on. Ding. Congratulations to the host for getting Re-Atsix 45,000. Ding. Congratulations to the host for acquiring Zanpakuto, Shinso. Ding. Congratulations to the host for acquiring the Shinso Shurikai skill, Gunsha Rain. Ding. Congratulations to the host for acquiring the Shinso Bankai skill, Shinso Kill. Ding. When the series of beeping sounds ended, the smile on Yu Taifeng's face became thicker. Just as he was about to open the system interface to view the harvest this time, the system prompt sounded again. Ding. Will you swallow the drop Zanpakuto and the corresponding skills? After success, all the characteristics and abilities of the swallowed object can be obtained. Facing this unprecedented situation, Yu Taifeng was puzzled. But after quick thinking, he responded, swallow. At this moment, he only felt that the gluttonous in his hand 07 actually gave out bursts of joy. After sinking my mind into the inner space of Zanpakuto, I only saw an incredible scene. I saw that Tao Tai was holding a huge white snake with his paws, and there were bursts of excited roars in his mouth. When Tao Tai saw Yu Taifeng appearing in the inner space, it was like a puppy protecting food, and in twos he grabbed the white snake and swallowed it into his belly. After a bleak sound of chewing, Tao Yang gently wiped his mouth with his paw, as if he was still unsatisfied. Thank you, my lord. The gluttonous thunderous voice echoed in this space. Yu Taifeng nodded slightly, and then left Zanpakuto's inner space. The reward he received after killing Ikamaru Jin this time really surprised him. Not only got a huge amount of Ryatsu, but it also gave gluttonous all the characteristics of Shinso. At this moment, he actually has an impulse to bloodbath Siriidii. Somewhere in the jungle of Siriidii, Aizen stood calmly beside a big tree. At this time an afterimage appeared behind him. After Tosen Kaname knelt down on one knee, he said respectfully, Aizen-sama, the silver Ryatsu has disappeared. Well, I know. Aizen responded softly. At this moment, there was no superfluous expression on his face, as if Ikamaru Jin's death had nothing to do with him. After a long silence, Tosen spoke again, Master Aizen, after the incident, I went to investigate and found the remaining breath of that person, read more at mtlarchive.com. Now Silver is dead, our plan. Aizen turned and looked at Tosen in front of him, with a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Then his face returned to calmness, and he said, Tosen, I didn't expect him to be so decisive. But by doing so, he provided us with some help. The whole plan can not only proceed smoothly, but also there will be no more flaws. After hearing Aizen's words, Tosen instantly understood what the other party meant. He nodded heavily, revealing a rare smile. It should be soon. Aizen slowly raised his head with a calm complexion, looked in the direction of the team house, and said. After a while, there was a strange spatial fluctuation in the sky above the team building. Along with this wave of fluctuations, a blue Lingzi net slowly floated into the sky. At this time, Chojiro Sasakai's solemn voice sounded above Siriidii. Attention to all teams. This is Chojiro Sasakai. Pass the order of Captain Yamamoto. 10 minutes ago, there was a vicious incident in which the captain was killed in the Beidaemon. After receiving the notice, the captains and deputy captains of the teams are requested to gather in the meeting room of the first team. At the same time, the teams will enter the first level of alert status from now on. Above. Aizen raised his face slightly, and said softly to Tosen, let's go. After a while, the two figures gradually disappeared into the jungle. At the same time, the 11th Division was in the training ground. Do you just have so little strength? Zaraki Kenpachi looked at everyone who was knocked to the ground by him, curled his lips with an unhappy expression and asked in a low voice. At this time, dozens of Shinigami players were lying on the ground of this training ground. At this time, an afterimage instantly appeared on Zaraki's shoulder. I saw Yakianryu with short pink shoulder-length hair, and pointed at the people on the ground with a displeased expression. You are so useless. Dozens of people can't make a Jian happy. A bald seat official slowly got up from the ground, and said with a grieved expression, Deputy Captain, we are just having fun with the captain. If we really want to fight, it is estimated that the captain would have killed us all. Yuichiro looked at Madarame Mikaku, who was explaining, and turned into an afterimage and stepped on his face. Oh, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts, Madarame Mikaku screamed when he fell on the ground. Please pay attention to all teams. At this moment, Chojiro Sasuke launched the voice transmission of Tian Ting Kong Luo into everyone's ears. After Zaraki Kenpachi heard the content, the expression on his face became excited. While holding Zanpakuto with fiery eyes, he ran outside the Team 743 building, and laughed excitedly. Well, great. It's been a long time since I saw Aizen so happy. Kusajishi Yuichiro yelled happily, and his figure flickered and disappeared. Siriidii, Confessional Palace. Rukia sitting on the edge of the bed was thinking about her worries. While he was in deep thought, he heard Chojiro Sasuke's voice transmission. At this moment, he looked into the distance outside Siriidii, and a look of worry appeared on his face. After killing Ikamaru Jin, Yu Taifeng walked aimlessly in the jingling pavilion while familiarizing himself with the new features of gourmet meal. After hearing Chojiro Sasuke's voice transmission, he smiled and shook his head, and continued to wander around in a leisurely manner. At this time, a weird Ryatsu that had never been encountered before, disappeared in a flash in the direction of Mao Shiaquin. Yu Taifeng, who was walking slowly, stopped suddenly. Because, he felt a breath of déjà vu from the weird Ryatsu just now. After stopping and thinking for a few seconds, there was a faint speculation in his heart. In order to confirm the thoughts in his heart, he shook his figure and increased his speed to the extreme, and hurried to the direction of Mao Shiaquin. Episode 83. Reunion. Yu Taifeng increased his speed to the extreme, shuttled back and forth in various buildings in Siriidii non-stop. In a short while, he had already arrived not far from Mao Shiaquin. Just as he was about to jump to the front of a roof, a familiar Ryatsu appeared behind him. You're back. At this moment, a soft voice came from behind Yu Taifeng. After hearing this familiar voice, he stopped his slightly forward-leaning body, turned and looked over. I saw Yhwach standing not far away, looking at him quietly. What a coincidence, Mao Yhwach. I didn't expect to see you here. Yu Taifeng waved to the opponent with a smile on his face. However, Mao Yhwach did not immediately respond to him, and stood there calmly. After seeing this reaction from the other party, Yu Taifeng still looked at her with a smile. It's not a coincidence, I just came here to do Konosuke a favor. It's you. After a long time, Yhwach finally replied, but in the end she seemed to be hesitant to talk. Me? I'm fine. It's just coming back to do a little thing. Yu Taifeng said with a smile. Mao Yhwach took a deep look at Yu Taifeng, sighed softly and said, although I admit that you are so strong, I finally gave up chasing you. But, do you know how serious the consequences of this incident today are? Yu Taifeng heard these words. Then I understood what the other party meant. He smiled and responded, so you wanted to talk about Ikamaru Jin. It's a small matter, there is nothing to worry about. But you, why don't you go to a team to report? Are you not afraid of being investigated by them after having something to do with me, the wanted criminal? After hearing these words, Yu Yhwach, who had always been calm, had a look of sadness in her eyes. She stared directly at Yu Taifeng and said, after so many years, you are still the same as you were before. How was it then? Yu Taifeng then asked with some confusion. Whoever thought that? Mao Yhwach turned around and left with a cold snort. Yu Taifeng looked at the back of the other party gradually moving away, and after thinking of her abnormal performance just now, he also realized it in an instant. He shook his head and smiled bitterly, while turning his gaze back to Mao Shiaquin not far away. Because the weird Ryatsu that caught his attention before came from here, read more at mtlarchive.com. First Team Meeting Room. Yamamoto Shigekuni closed his eyes gently, not knowing what was thinking in his mind. The captains and deputy captains standing on either side of him all stared at a stretcher in the center of the conference room. Matsumoto Ranjaku looked at Ikamaru Jin's body on the stretcher, bit his purple lips and slowly turned his head to the side. At this moment, the atmosphere in the entire conference room is extremely solemn. I don't know who sighed softly, making the already solemn atmosphere a bit depressing. After Chojiro Sasakaibe asked Yamamoto Shigekoku a few words in a low voice, he took a step forward. Immediately, he said, the suspect in the murder of Ikamaru Jin, the captain of the 3rd Division, has been locked. After investigation and research, the suspect has been basically confirmed. It was exactly what Yu Taifeng, who defected from Soul Society 112 years ago, did. Because this person is extremely dangerous, after discussion, it is decided to upgrade the security level of Siriidii to special level. Since this person may have props or secrets to hide Ryatsu, please search strictly according to the corresponding area. If there is any discovery, please do not conflict, and you must report it as soon as possible. After hearing the order conveyed by Chojiro Sasakaibe, everyone in the conference room said in unison, yes. Yamamoto Shigekuni slowly opened his eyes, knocked the crutches heavily on the wooden floor under his feet, and then said in a deep voice, the meeting is over. When the staff in charge of the funeral affairs carried Ikamaru Jin's body away, everyone also dispersed in 2s and 3s. After Aizen glanced around without a trace, the corners of his mouth rose slightly. When he walked out of the gate, he walked slowly towards the 5th Division team house. Hinamori Momo, who was following him, asked nervously and softly, Captain Aizen, would you like to go back to the team building to handle the team affairs? Let me take them on patrol. Aizen, who was walking quietly in front, stopped after hearing these words. He turned and looked at Hinamori Momo in front of him, with a faint smile on his face, and softly comforted him, Hinamori, thank you for your kindness. But as the captain of the 5th Division, how can I back down at this time? You can handle the team affairs with peace of mind, and I will take care of other things. Just when Hinamori Momo wanted to speak, Aizen raised his right hand and touched her head. I saw her blushing and stammering. At this time, a tall black shadow flashed past the two of them. It turned out to be Zaraki Kenpachi and Kusajishi Yuichiro lying on his shoulders. Aizen, hurry, hurry. I feel that breath is right in front. Yasenryu gently patted Zaraki's shoulder and said loudly. After a while, they disappeared. Winohana also passed by Aizen and Hinamori Momo at this time. She smiled and nodded to the two of them, and then walked away unhurriedly. Aizen frowned slightly, looking at Uzi, who was leaving back. He smiled and looked at Hinamori Momo in front of him and said, Hinamori, let's go. Yes, Lan, Zhao? R. After Yu Taifeng put on the Lingxer clothing, he jumped to the ground. After entering Mao Xiaoyuan, he walked quickly along the previously locked position. After searching for a period of time, Yu Taifeng came to a detached courtyard. %3D. Captain Aizen, I know. Team leader. Hinamori Momo blushed and hurried to follow. A huge plaque was hung above the gate outside the courtyard with the words Zongdai on it. A layer of white spirit enchantment enveloped the entire yard, emitting a faint white light from time to time. A strange Ryatsu loomed in the deepest part of the courtyard. Yu Taifeng leaped slightly and stood in the air above the courtyard. After opening the barrier with his hand, his figure disappeared again. Somewhere in Siriidi's mansion, a feminine-looking man smiled evilly, picked up Zanpakuto next to him and slowly stood up. Episode 84. Yamada Kyanasuke. Mao Xiaoyuan, the Soyoi Hospital. A young man with white hair was looking for something by the medicine rack. After a while, he looked at the faintly white bead in his hand and nodded gently. His face, which was so white that it almost lost its blood, also showed a smile of satisfaction at this moment. After turning his head and looking at the monster on the operating table, the smile on his face slowly disappeared. After a deep sigh, he clenched the beads in his hands and walked towards the operating table. After placing the beads in his hands on the monster's head, he whispered in his mouth, "Key in with both hands." After a while, the white light emitted from the beads became brighter and brighter. The originally bright operating table is like a white sun at the moment. Warm but dazzling. The man squinted his eyes slightly, ignoring the dazzling glare, his expression earnestly observing. For him, this operation is not only the task explained above, but also a rare and good opportunity. If this operation is successful, his forbearance for so many years will also become meaningful. When the bead finally turned into a strong spiritual energy, the white light on the operating table also slowly disappeared. Drop. The monitor placed on the side of the operating table was emitting a faint beep at this time. He glanced at the monster on the operating table and wiped the sweat from his head with his elbow. 747 immediately took out a notepad full of time from the side table, waved the brush in his hand and started to record. That's right. It's a brush. Beside the modern instruments and operating table, but holding a writing brush to make notes. The contrast is self-evident. However, his performance gave people a sense of what they should be. After Yu Taifeng entered the Zhongdai Buyuan, he walked forward slowly along with the breath of recklessness. At this time, he had come to a small two-story building in the courtyard. More than a dozen guards wearing black clothes and masks are patrolling alternately with a clear division of labor. I saw that they were wearing a standard dagger around their waists, and a palm-sized mirror was worn on their left wrist. On the dazzling mirror, a dark green family emblem was also drawn. At this time, bursts of dark green light flashed on the guards' mirrors. Everyone, watch out. Someone broke in. Be careful. It's all around us. Show up. We have found you. Be careful not to let him slip in. 1. Read more at mtlarchive.com. The dozen or so guards all put on a look as if they were facing an enemy. Ugh. What a trouble. Yu Taifeng whispered in secret and pulled out his zanpakuto without hesitation. Hundreds of black sword lights appeared on the heads of the guards like rain, killing them all in an instant. Seeing the corpse on the ground slowly turning into strands of ashes, Yu Taifeng retracted the sword into its sheath and walked into the second-story building beside him. When he walked into this building, the weirdness of Ryatsu became more and more obvious. Yu Taifeng didn't stop much, and walked directly towards the source of Ryatsu. After arriving in a basement, he slowly opened a black door. With a creaking sound, Yu Taifeng found himself in a laboratory. In front of an operating table not far away, there was a figure who didn't know what was busy. When the white-haired young man heard the sound behind him, he turned around to look in a little panic. However, he found nothing. Illusion, the white-haired young man whispered. Just as he was about to turn around and continue to be busy, he only saw a familiar figure slowly appearing not far away. Teacher? The white-haired young man exclaimed an exclamation with that figure with incredible eyes. Yu Taifeng was taken aback for a moment, then walked forward slowly, smiling and saying, Kinasuk, long time no see. Yamada Kyanasuk hurriedly put the things in his hands aside, and rushed to Yu Taifeng in 3 or 2 steps. After bending his waist to 90 degrees and giving a big gift, he said in a respectful tone, Teacher, you are finally back. Yu Taifeng looked at Kyanasuk, who was excited before his eyes, and nodded with a smile. Then he turned his attention to the operating table not far away. A sword. A sword. You are going in the wrong direction. It should be this way. Kusajishi Yuichiro gently pulled Zaraki Kenpachi's collar and said. Huh? Is that right? You are not pointing the wrong way again this time? Zaraki Kenpachi asked as he ran quickly, turning his head. Aizen. The direction must be right this time. Hurry, hurry. That's over there. Kusajishi Yuichiro patted the opponent's shoulder excitedly, and urged. Just as these two Luchi were still running around, 2 familiar figures appeared in front of them. Aizen and Tosen Kaname, who were walking side by side, slowly stopped after seeing the oncoming two. Master Aizen, Tosen Kaname lowered his head and said softly. When Zaraki Kenpachi and Kusajishi Yuichiro passed by the two of them, Aizen smiled and nodded at them, saying hello. Aizen's complexion returned to calm after seeing the fading back of the two Zaraki. He turned his head and whispered to Tosen Kaname next to him, I will execute the plan tonight. If you have any questions, come to room 46 to find me. Yes. Aizen-sama. Tosen Kaname nodded respectfully. After a while, the two left each in different directions. Yu Taifeng and Kyanasuk kept their gazes on the operating table not far away after a long conversation. He looked at the monster on the operating table curiously, and asked, Shinosuk, what happened? And what happened to this child? Yamada Kyanasuk shook his head lightly, his eyes full of helplessness. Teacher, actually a lot of things happened after you left. Kyanasuk explained in detail what happened in the past 100 years. Along with his narration, the expression on his face also changed in various ways, as if he had experienced it all over again. After Shangha was sealed, I was eventually removed from the team because I went to the 46th outdoor to protest. If it weren't for the help of Captain Wazihua, I'm probably still being held in the maggot's nest. As for the child on the operating table, it was sent by Tsuneyashiro's family. Although I don't know what his identity is, I found some different places in his body. Shinosuke stood aside respectfully and said, Mao Yhwach? I didn't expect that she would help you. As for Shangha, I will find a way. And this child. At this time, a burst of clear applause came from the door, interrupting the two who were talking. Unexpectedly, you still have some skills, you can discover the secrets of Yenmi. At this time, an evil man with a feminine appearance walked into the laboratory. Yu Taifeng and Kainosuke turned their heads and looked around, only to see the man staring at them coldly. At this moment, the man slowly walked forward 2 steps, and the expression on his face gradually became ugly. Episode 85. 500 Years of Calculations. Yu Taifeng looked calmly at the feminine man who walked slowly across, and could not see any psychological fluctuations. Kainosuke took 2 steps back, nervously at this time. The feminine man looked at the two with a sneer, and said, I have been waiting for 500 years on this day. There is so much nonsense. Yu Taifeng pulled out his Zanpakuto and snorted coldly. I saw that the blade of Zanpakuto in his hand suddenly began to soar, and it attacked the feminine man with a whistling sound. At this moment, a dark shadow passed by Yu Taifeng and Kainosuke, and in a flash, it stood in front of the feminine man. It was the unconscious child on the operating table just now. In fact, it is more appropriate to say that he is a monster rather than a child. Because this child has only the head intact. From the neck down, it is all wriggling strange meat. It is a strange sarcoma with a child's head, skull. Along with a loud noise, the Zanpakuto burst out of Yu Taifeng's hand was blocked by a monster-like child. At this time, the feminine man's face was sneered again and again, his eyes were full of disdain. Yu Taifeng, for this day, I have planned for 500 years. Today, I will let you die to understand. The words of the feminine man were full of resentment, as if he wanted to swallow Yu Taifeng not far away. Teacher, he is the current head of the family division of the Tsuneyashiro family, Tsuneyashiro Tokunada. Yamamoto Kainosuke said nervously. The cold expression on Yu Taifeng's face gradually slowed down, and a slight smile appeared on his face. He looked at the unkindly feminine man in front of him, shook his head lightly and said, People from the Tsuneyashiro family? If I remember correctly, I seem to have killed a few casually 500 years ago. It seems that this family does not seem to exist anymore. Tsuneyashiro Tokunada smiled without anger when he heard what the two said. After a few sharp smiles, his eyes closed slightly, like a deadly poisonous snake. It's worthy of being the most enchanting Tion in Soul Society, he just wanted to destroy a family casually, huh? But since I have been operating this matter 500 years ago, how can I fail to consider this? 200 years ago, when my plan was about to mature, I killed my wife first. It is estimated that by now, the killers I hired have already killed everyone in the Tsuneyashiro family. I will not give you any chance to retaliate against me. Ha 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 ha. Tsuneyayoi Tokunada said excitedly, as if he had done something earth-shattering. Yamamoto Kainosuke's eyes widened in shock after hearing this subversive cognition. On the contrary, it was Yu Taifeng who was targeted, and his face calmly said softly. Hikia. Tokunada shouted at the child standing in front of him. Hey ha 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 ha, a strange laughter came from the child's mouth. Read more at mtlarchive.com. Accompanied by the sound of the friction of the iron chain, huge changes began to take place next to the children in front of Tokunada. A majestic Ryatsu spewed out from him, with a gloomy, bloodthirsty breath. I saw a sarcoma under the child's neck, shining red, white and blue. After a while, slender limbs grew on this massive sarcoma. When he was completely transformed into a child, a big sword wrapped in white cloth on his guard also slowly appeared in front of him. Master Tokunada, do you want Yenya to play with him? The child seemed to be holding the big sword in his hand with some difficulty, and asked, with a puzzled look. Tokunada looked at Yenya in front of him as if he was admiring a perfect artwork. After a long time, he said with a smile, Yenmi, he is the new toy I gave you. When Yenmi heard the word toy, he cheered happily, haha, thank you Tashitan-sama. Yenmi likes toys the most, he. Go. Shirtan looked at Yu Taifeng not far away, and said. As soon as Tokunada's voice fell, Yenmi quickly struck Yu Taifeng in the direction of Yu Taifeng with a burst of laughter and the big sword in his hand. Yenmi wants to play with you he. At this moment, the situation on the court was unexpectedly weird. Shinosuke, be careful yourself. After Yu Taifeng dropped a word, his figure turned into an afterimage to greet him. Boom. 0. Look for flowers. In the sound of the collision of swords, two black afterimages were intertwined and struggling. Tsunayayoi Tokunada looked at the two black shadows that kept flashing, and smiled triumphantly. Hikoya is not an ordinary child, he is the greatest work of art. Soul Society's most enchanting genius? You don't know what power is. Yenmi, leave me all his hands and feet. Seeing the scene in front of him, Shionosuke's intestines almost turned blue. He couldn't think that the task he received had caused such a big trouble to the teacher. Although he was very confident in Yu Taifeng's strength, when he thought of the three powers in Yenmi, he couldn't help but start to worry. Teacher. Be careful. He has it on him. However, before Shionosuke's words were finished, he saw a dark figure flying backwards in the direction of Tokunada. Boom. This black shadow smashed directly against the wall with a huge impact. At this time, Kayanosuke saw clearly what happened on the court. In the dust and smoke, Yenmi's small body was like a puddle of mud, sticking to the sunken wall behind him in a strange posture. After seeing this scene, Tokunada, who was still proud of his face, gradually solidified the expression on his face. He looked at Yu Taifeng, who was not far away, with an incredible look, and exclaimed, "How is this possible? Yenya is the most perfect work of art." He is. Yu Taifeng glanced at Tokunada casually, and said indifferently, "Forcibly combine the power of Shinigami, Su, and Quincy. It seems that you have really made a lot of preparations. But is this useful?" Tokunada looked at Yu Taifeng, who was talking in shock, and involuntarily stepped back 2 steps. At this moment, a violent Ryatsu rushed straight from the wall where the dust had dissipated. Around the stars. Already. Along with this violent Ryatsu, a tender voice echoed throughout the laboratory. Thank you very much for the monthly pass of Wheelin' Zero. Episode 86. Assist? Doesn't exist. Siriidii, Phoenix Palace. Ere Meiwu Wangyu was gently swinging the hammer in his hand, beating the blade of the sword on the anvil. As the hammer in his hand fell again and again, the entire sword blade began to gradually become elongated. My lord. That breath. A girl with a neat hair braid and her right eye covered by the sea asked with a puzzled face. Wangyu put down the hammer in his hand, turned his head and looked into the distance. Isn't it always in the sword magazine under the sea? Wangyu looked at the girl in front of him with a puzzled expression, his face was full of surprise. My lord, we. Mela said with lingering fears while feeling the familiar breath. Mela, I'll go out one by one, you take Shijiang and the others to the seabed sword library to check it. Wangyu said with a serious expression. Then he disappeared in a flash, 747, and stayed in place. Mao Shioen. Around the stars. It's already there. Accompanied by this tender voice, a majestic Ryatsu envelopes the entire laboratory with bursts of tyrannical and bloodthirsty aura. Yenya, who seemed to have a weak breath just now, seemed to have not suffered any injuries at this time. Countless red veins spread all over his body, and his skin also exudes bursts of silver-gray metallic luster. Roar. A strange creature that looked like Minos Grande's arm let out an angry roar. Don't ask me why my arm yells, I don't know. Fun, really fun, Yenmi opened his eyes wide and stared at Yu Taifeng and said. At this moment, he seemed to be looking at a funny toy, his face was full of excitement and excitement. Toki-tan looked at Yu Taifeng not far away and let out a burst of triumphant laughter again. He spread his hands, pretending to be helpless, and said, Oh, Yenya Zanpakuto turned out to be Shirkai. I'm afraid you can't think of the origin of the Zanpakuto? Ha 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 ha. Come and play with me. Yenmi laughed and rushed towards Yu Taifeng's position with Zanpakuto, who turned into a monster. Boom rumble. A loud noise came from under everyone's feet. The laboratory, which was already severely damaged, shook violently like a landslide and began to collapse. After a while, a huge crack appeared under everyone's feet. Swallow it. Gourmet meal. I saw Yu Taifeng staring at Yenmi indifferently, liberating his Zanpakuto. At this moment, 2 huge black holes appeared in the entire laboratory, frantically devouring the surrounding Ryatsu and Lingzi. At this time, Mao Shiyayuan, the main generation hospital, also began to collapse slowly because of this terrifying suction, and it turned into a ruin in a short while. In the Shiyayuan building not far from the Zhongdai Buyuan, there were also bursts of exclamation and screams. Look at it. What happened to the Zhongdai Buyuan? Read more at mtlarchive.com. General Yamada is in danger. Quick. Hurry up and notify the patrol team. Protect the adults in the yard. Otherwise, we will be in trouble. After seeing this scene, many staff members gathered together and discussed nervously. Because, Maoxia Yuan is an institution dedicated to serving the top nobles of Jingling. So if there is any accident, they will be severely sanctioned. Cut. Yu Taifeng yelled and swung the sword to cut out a huge black sword shadow. Boom rumble. Hikiya and the materialized Zanpakuto were directly bombarded by the sword shadow and flew out, causing clouds of dust and smoke again. However, after a while, Yenmi stood up again like an okay person. He looked at Yu Taifeng a little angrily, and shouted, "Not fun at all. Yenmi is angry. Angry. Let me remember it." As soon as Yenmi's voice fell, he saw the monster with the arm-like appearance beside him, which had undergone tremendous changes. A monster that looked somewhat similar to Minos Grande, and was much larger than Jillian, waved away the dust and smoke around him and let out a roar. In the distance, Tsuneyayoi Tokunada's face showed a smug look. He said in a weird manner, "The battle between you and old man Yamamoto more than 100 years ago was really thrilling. Worthy of being the most demon genius in the history of Soul Society. Good job." Bankai's Ryujin Jaka took only a few seconds and almost evaporated the water in Jingling Palace. Because of this, I have to thank you very much. If you didn't irritate old Yamamoto, he would not launch Bankai. In this case, the seabed sword magazine outside the Phoenix Palace would not be revealed. Where can I find this Zanpakuto for Yenya? Ha 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 ha. Yu Taifeng ignored Tokunada who was talking in the distance, and once again turned into an afterimage and struggled with Yenmi. Tokunada looked at the scene in front of him, the smug look on his face aggravated. He looked at Yu Taifeng rushing towards Yenmi with a sword, and sneered twice in disdain. Then he continued, "The steel skin and static blood suit on Yenmi's body are not so good." Boom rumble. With a violent explosion, Tokunada, who had not finished speaking, stood still on the spot, and the scene in front of him couldn't help but frighten him. I saw a huge sword shadow hundreds of meters long, falling from the sky, directly splitting the Minos Grande-like monster into two halves. Yenmi, who rushed towards Yu Taifeng, turned his entire body into strands of flying ash, and only the strange head was still spinning in midair. How is this possible? How can you break the steel skin and static blood costume on Yenmi's body at once? Yenmi! Yenmi! Open the black cavity. There was still a trace of that calmness in Tokunada just now, and he shouted at the head in midair with a look of horror. Tokunada, Lord Tokunada. Yenmi 1.6, it hurts. Yenmi still wants to play for a while. Yenmi let out a painful sigh, and then it turned into fly ash and drifted away in the wind. Wait song. Zanpakuto, with a white cloth wrapped around the handle of a sword, lay quietly on the ground after making a soft noise. At this time a black space crack appeared behind Tokunada. He stared at Yu Taifeng with a bitter expression on his face, and then jumped directly into the crack behind him and disappeared. Yamada Kayanosuke lifted the slate he had just pressed on his body with his head and face, and after wiping the dust off his face with his hands, he ran straight to Yu Taifeng. "Teacher," Kayanosuke said softly. "I'll be back soon." After Yu Taifeng dropped a sentence, it turned into an afterimage and rushed into the black space crack. Episode 87. 9 Heavens Mirror Valley. Yamada Kayanosuke looked at the disappearing figure of Yu Taifeng, with a faint worry on his face. At this moment, a black figure appeared beside him. It was Wang Yu, who had left the Anti-Phoenix Palace before. He glanced at the bewildered Kayanosuke, and then came to the Zanpakuto on the ground in an instant. Looking at the cracks on the sword's body, Wang Yu whispered with some doubts. "It's actually possible to split the already Jijiba. The strength of this guy is getting more and more incomprehensible." When Wang Yu was still in the Phoenix Palace, he had already felt Yu Taifeng's Ryatsu early. Although they hadn't seen each other for hundreds of years, he knew that the other party would not be in any danger based on his understanding of Yu Taifeng. After all, in his opinion, Yu Taifeng was already a top powerhouse 100 years ago. He smiled and shook his head, took "I already have my own" in his hand, and then walked in the direction of Kayanosuke. The 5th Division Team House. Aizen hurriedly got up and came to the courtyard. With a calm face, 07 looked at the direction of Maoxiakin, with a faint smile on his face. At this time, Hinamori Momo also came to the courtyard behind him. When she felt the Ryatsu coming from a distance, she looked at Aizen's back slightly nervously. "Hinamori, don't worry, everything will be fine." Aizen turned around and said to Wizento with a smile. At this moment, a huge blue Lingzi net appeared above the team building of the first division. Chojiro Sasuke's voice also began to echo throughout Suriidai. Attention to all teams. Attention to all teams. This is Chojiro Sasuke. Following the order of Captain Yamamoto, the following notice is now broadcast. A few minutes ago, there was a big battle in Maoshiyayuan. It was preliminarily judged that Yu Taifeng, the principal offender of Soul Society, was committed. The captains of each division are requested to gather in the conference room of the first division. Captain Aizen, is that person really as scary as the legend? Hinamori Momo asked with curiosity on his face. After hearing what the other party said, Aizen nodded slightly and said, he is really great, but you don't have to worry, everything will be fine. I'm leaving first, I'm afraid the captain has been waiting for a long time. Hinamori Momo looked at Aizen's fading back and said to himself, Captain Aizen. After Yu Taifeng followed Tsuneyayoi Tokunada into the Black Chamber, he quickly passed through a dim space passage. After a while, he arrived somewhere in Hueco Mundo. At this time, Tokunada, who had been fleeing before, had stopped and slowly turned around. Unexpectedly, you really dared to follow. Tokunada's face didn't have the panic look at all, but a joking smile appeared on the contrary. Read more at mtlarchive.com. However, Yu Taifeng didn't pay attention to Tokunada, but directly raised Zanpakuto in his hand and turned into an afterimage and rushed over. Boom. After a loud noise, Tokunada flew backwards due to a huge impact. Cut. With Yu Taifeng's soft drink, a black sword shadow quickly struck Tokunada, who had just stabilized his figure. Offer it. 9 Heavens Mirror Valley. Tokunada said softly with a cold gaze. As soon as his voice fell, a huge mirror appeared in front of him. The black sword shadow seemed to disappear suddenly after hitting the mirror. After seeing this scene, Yu Taifeng frowned slightly, then turned into an afterimage and rushed up again. When he was about to rush in front of the opponent, a black sword shadow flew out of the mirror and swiftly struck towards his front door. Yu Taifeng snorted coldly, blocking Zanpakuto in front of him. After a loud noise, he also retreated tens of meters back violently, and then stabilized and stopped. Toki-tan looked at Yu Taifeng in the distance, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. He shook hands with Zanpakuto tightly and waved forward. At this moment, a huge monster appeared beside him. Amazingly, it was Yenya's Zanpakuto Bankai and turned into a monster similar to Minos Grande. Roar. Along with the monster's roar, a grey tornado roared towards Yu Taifeng. Ha ha ha, isn't it surprising? The excitement is yet to come. Tokunada said loudly with a wild laugh. Imitate. 9 Heavens Mirror Valley. Then he shouted again and waved Zanpakuto dozens of times in the direction of Yu Taifeng. The Zanpakuto in Tokunada's hand was wrapped in layers of green light, and the surrounding space was distorted. A crescent-shaped firelight appeared out of thin air and flew quickly towards Yu Taifeng. In an instant, another huge ice dragon roared and attacked Yu Taifeng along with the previous fire. Tokunada waved Zanpakuto in his hands excitedly, and said loudly, a genius from Rukongai? You never know how terrifying the blood relatives of the royal family are. Boom. Boom rumble. A burst of violent explosions sounded at the location where Yu Taifeng was located. Fire, ice dragon, sword rain, cherry blossom. Various attacks fell from the sky one after another, instantly raising the sand dune to the ground. The monster that was summoned, surrounded by several grey tornadoes, also rushed towards the dusty area. At that time, Nada saw the 747 behind the scene, and made strange screams with excitement on his face, and continued to attack with Zanpakuto waving his hands. Soul Society's most enchanting genius? But so. Ha ha ha. 9 Heavens, Mirror Valley. Release all the powerful abilities I have seen. Go to hell. Go to hell. Ha 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 ha. Tokunada screamed hysterically, as if he wanted to vent all the grievances accumulated in his heart for many years. At this moment, his originally feminine face was faintly twisted, shuddering like a life-killing evil spirit. While Tan was still venting the anger in his heart, only a figure appeared quietly behind him. This Zanpakuto looks really good. Tokunada, who was still a little hysterical, instantly froze after hearing the voice coming from behind him. He slowly turned around and looked at Yu Taifeng with a smile in front of him, almost sitting on the ground in fright. You, how can you possibly? Tokunada's face was full of horror, and when he wanted to say something, he only felt a terrifying energy wave from above his head. Just when he wanted to look up, the whole person was drowned in the black shadow of the sword. With the death of Tonata, the system prompt also appeared in Yu Taifeng's mind. Episode 88. Reflection. Follow. Ding. Congratulations to the host for getting Yhwach's 30,000. Ding. Congratulations to the host for acquiring Zanpakuto, 9 Heavens Mirror Valley. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Shurkai skills in the 9 Heavens Mirror Valley. Reflection. Ding. Congratulations to the host for acquiring the Bankai technique of 9 Heavens Mirror Valley. Follow suit. At that time, after Tada's Ryatsu was completely absorbed by Yu Taifeng, he also knew why Zanpakuto in the opponent's hand had such a weird skill. When the two were fighting, it was precisely because of the reflective characteristics of the Shurkai of 9 Heavens Mirror Valley that he almost suffered a dark loss. After blocking the reflex attack, he took out the spirit mask from the system backpack and put it on his body. Before Tokonata launched Bankai, he had already jumped into the air, quietly observing how Tokonata on the ground would attack later. After seeing the opponent's Zanpakuto release various highly recognizable attacks, he saw some clues from it. However, although Tokonata has such a powerful Zanpakuto, Naiha is too weak, so he did not exert the true power of 9 Heavens Mirror Valley. Ding. Will you swallow the drop Zanpakuto and the corresponding skills? After success, all the characteristics and abilities of the swallowed object can be obtained. The system prompt sounded again. After Ikamaru Jin was killed last time, Nuyang had all its characteristics because it swallowed the relationship of Shinso. So now, what can happen to the 9 Heavens Mirror Valley? This made him look forward to it. After Yu Taifeng sank his mind into the inner space of Zanpakuto, he heard a weird sound. When he looked at the place where the sound originated, he couldn't help being speechless. I saw the gluttonous meal holding a mirror that is several meters high with its paws, and was eating with relish. When Taotai noticed Yu Taifeng's gaze, he roared cheerfully, and ate the mirror clean in twos like a biscuit. Thank my lord. The sound of gluttonous food echoed in this space like thunder. Yu Taifeng's eyebrows jumped slightly, nodded with embarrassment, and then left the inner space of Zanpakuto. When Taotai swallowed 9 Heavens Mirror Valley, he also instantly understood the new spirit sword characteristics he had just acquired. Reflection is very easy to understand. Just like the literal meaning, it can reflect all attacks received. To imitate is to imitate everything Yu Taifeng has seen Zanpakuto. As for the abilities of these two characteristics, it is determined by the user's Ryatsu. The stronger the user's Ryatsu, the greater the power it exerts. The opposite is true. Read more at mtlarchive.com. When Yu Taifeng thought of Tokonata already dead to death, he couldn't help but shook his head slightly. 9 Sky Mirror Valley in his hands is simply a violent thing. But there is no other way. Who makes his Ryatsu so low? Yu Taifeng would never have thought that he would have such unexpected gains during this trip. After thinking for a while, he weighed Zanpakuto in his hand to experiment. Siriidii, the first team meeting room. The atmosphere of the meeting room at this time was a little weird, and it was surprisingly quiet. Yamamoto Shigekuni slowly opened his eyes, glanced at the people standing on both sides, and said in a deep voice, "In just one day, there were 2 vicious incidents. Now it is a troubled time. First, the team members allocated spiritual power to ordinary people in this world, so that they were sentenced to death. Seeing that the sentence is approaching, this kind of accident has happened again now. As the captain of the old man, it is naturally difficult to answer. But this time room 46 is for us to discuss and decide on our own. If you have any opinions, please speak freely." Byakuya Kuchiki stood indifferently on the spot. Just now, when he heard the words torture, he frowned slightly. Mao Zhihua was also silent at this time, with a hint of worry on her face. At this time, Sajin, a burly-shaped masked village, walked out, bowed and saluted, and said to Yamamoto Shigekuni, "The village is willing to follow the command of the leader." With a haggard face, Joshiro Yukite coughed slightly, and looked at Kayaraku Shunsui beside him and stopped talking. Aizen looked at the people around him calmly, a strange light flashed in his eyes. After a while, everyone looked at Yamamoto Shijoku, who closed their eyes and rested. Hueco Mundo in a desert. Yu Taifeng waved Zanpakuto in his hand, attacking again and again. At this moment, he was standing quietly on a blue lake, with cherry blossoms falling beside him from time to time. When a crimson wall of fire surrounded him, a white devil fish flew out of thin air in the lake below his feet. Yu Taifeng nodded with a smile, and put Zanpakuto in the scabbard. At this time, the vision that happened around him also disappeared. Then he entered the crossing gate that appeared in front of him. After a while of brilliance, his figure appeared in Mao Yuan. Previously, due to the pursuit of Tsune Yayoi Tokunada, he did not pick up the box that Yenya dropped after his death. He was dressed in the spirit mask. Naturally, he was not discovered by the Shinigami team members who were temporarily dispatched here. At this time, the system prompt also appeared in his mind. Ding. The box around the host is detected. Is the host open? Yu Taifeng glanced at the Shinigami who were guarding the scene, and responded, turn on. Ding. Congratulations to the host for getting Ryatsu's 50,000. Ding. Congratulations to the host for getting the static blood outfit. Ding. Congratulations to the host for getting the bloody outfit. After obtaining the trophy for killing Yenmi, Zhao Ma Zhao, he quietly left the Genryūsai Yao Yuan. What makes Yu Taifeng a little speechless is that there is no Zanpakuto supplement in the dropped items. Originally, he still wanted to let the gluttonous have a good meal, but now it seems to be out of play. But he changed his mind to think that the current gluttonous already possesses the characteristics of the Nine Heavens Mirror Valley, which is not a big deal. After all, the gluttonous in his hands is definitely a bug in Shinigami's world. Immediately after Yu Taifeng teleported here, he observed 4 weeks for the first time. However, he did not find a trace of Yamato Kyosuke. Considering that he had nothing to do now, he decided to find out where Sōsuke was. Just as Yu Taifeng was about to set out to find Sōsuke, a familiar Ryatsu slowly appeared not far from him. He immediately turned into an afterimage and rushed to the source of the Ryatsu. Episode 89. Troubled Autumn. In an alley not far from Mao Yuan, Kyosuke walked slowly behind Nemea Wanyu. When the two came to the middle of the alley, Wanyu turned tightly to the direction of when he came. This couldn't help but make Sōsuke nervous. For him, the seemingly careless man in front of him always gives him an unfathomable feeling. Seeing Zanpakuto in Wanyu's hands, Sōsuke seemed to think of something in the past. At this moment, Wanyu actually said loudly to the empty alley, "The Phoenix Palace hasn't been to a guest for a long time." This weird behavior of Wanyu undoubtedly made Kyosuke feel puzzled. At this time, Yu Taifeng's figure slowly appeared not far away. "Teacher?" Qin Jijia said excitedly. Yu Taifeng slowly walked into the alley, patted Kyosuke's shoulder lightly, and said with a smile, "I didn't expect you to be arrested for questioning, it seems." Wanyu looked at Yu Taifeng a little serious, interrupted him directly, and said, "This time you owe me a favor. Master Sword God today is a bit serious." Yu Taifeng smiled and said to Wanyu. As a junior, Sōsuke naturally didn't understand what the two were talking about. His 750 could only watch from the sidelines. After supporting Wanyu's forehead, he shrugged helplessly, and said with a smile, "Hey. How did you find out? By the way, is my acting so bad? However, it is true that you owe me favor this time." At this moment, both Yu Taifeng and Wanyu turned to look at the silent Kyosuke. Kyosuke smiled awkwardly at the two, and finally understood what they meant. He scratched his head a little embarrassedly, and said, "Thanks to this adult today, otherwise I might have been put in an underground prison." After greetings for a while, Wanyu summoned a portal, and the figures of the three of them disappeared in the alley. First team meeting room. The captains of the squad, who were separated on both sides of Yamamoto's heavy country, stood still in silence at this time. Because they just got a message. In the Tsuneyashiro family, one of the 4 nobles, all the others were killed except for the family leader, Tsuneyashiro Tokunada. After some discussion, the suspect was finally designated as Yu Taifeng. After Yamamoto announced the adjournment of the meeting, everyone also left their team houses. "Aizen! Hurry up! People have been waiting for you for a long time." Kusajishi Yuichiro said loudly after looking at the oncoming Zaraki Kenpachi. After Aizen passed by Chaolu, he smiled and said, "The deputy captain of Chaolu looks quite energetic." Zaraki Kenpachi also walked out at this time. He watched Aizen snort disdainfully. In Zaraki's view, people like Aizen who practice calligraphy on weekdays can't experience the fun of fighting at all. Aizen was not angry because of Zaraki's attitude. He still had a faint smile on his face and said, "Captain Zaraki should also pay attention to safety. After all, there have been too many things recently." Read more at mtlarchive.com. "I have to go back to the team building to handle the teamwork, so I'll leave first." At this time, Kusajishi Yuichiro has jumped on Zaraki's shoulder and pointed his finger in the direction of the 0 Division station. Wang Yu led Yu Taifeng and Genryūsai to the Phoenix Palace, and first let Mela settle them down. After the three of them had dinner together, they came to the living room. After a while of conversation, Wang Yu also roughly understood the cause and course of the incident. At this moment, he looked at Yu Taifeng, who was sitting next to him, and asked curiously, "You said Tsune Yayoi Tokunada was killed by you, but I have no doubt about this. However, I remember that they have a handful of Zanpakuto from the Tsuneyashiro family, which seems to be called Nine Heaven Mirror Valley. Although, all sealed state is created by me. However, sometimes there are some special situations. After the sword was awakened by their Tsuneyashiro's first-generation patriarch, it actually possessed the power to pass on. You can use that Zanpakuto only if you have the lineage of the Tsuneyashiro family. As for the specific capabilities of it, I don't know, it is estimated that only the monk knows, og. But I am very curious, where did the Zanpakuto go after you killed him?" When Yu Taifeng heard what Wang Yu said, he smiled and said, "The Nine Heavens Mirror Valley has been eaten by my gluttonous food." "Ha ha 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 ha, you are joking with me again," Wang Yu said with a laugh. At this moment, a figure slowly appeared outside the meeting room. It turned out to be the flower of Mao. She smiled and walked into the meeting room of the Phoenix Palace, and slightly bowed to Wang Yu and said, "Master Sword God, excuse me." "Captain Yuanoka," Shinosuke said with some excitement after seeing Yuanoka. Yu Taifeng saw the sudden appearance of Yhwach, and he was really surprised, but he still smiled and clicked on Yhwach, which was regarded as a greeting. "Yhwach, how did you think of coming to me today? Is that guy Tianshirlang not there?" Wang Yu scratched his head curiously. Yhwach still smiled, and finally fixed her gaze on Yu Taifeng. The smile on her face gradually disappeared, and her complexion became a little serious. After seeing this scene, Wang Yu's eyes flashed with enlightenment. He got up and came to Shinosuke's side, patted him on the shoulder and said, "Hey boy, let me take you to other places." Shinosuke seemed to have thought of something at this time. After saluting Yu Taifeng and Yhwach separately, he left with Wang Yu. "Is the leader of the Tsuneyashiro clan dead?" Yhwach frowned slightly and asked. "Yeah." Yu Taifeng nodded softly. Wanoka shook her head and said, "Although it doesn't matter to you, but Tsuneyashiro's affairs are all directed at you. Don't you worry about being misunderstood at all?" Yu Taifeng slowly got up and came to Mao Yhwach and watched her silently for a long time. After seeing the other person's eyes, the face of Mao Yhwach, who was still looking like water, showed a red glow on her face. "Thank you, Mao Yhwach." After a long time, Yu Taifeng said softly. "Oh." Mao Yhwach sighed lightly, and resumed her usual appearance. It was late at night in a blink of an eye. Yu Taifeng looked at the figure slowly disappearing under the moonlight, and looked up into the distance. The 5th Division Team House. Hinamori Momo, who just woke up, instantly thought of yesterday's events. She never thought that she would fall asleep in the captain's room. When Hinamori Momo just wanted to apologize, he found that there was no Aizen in the captain's room. Looking at the empty captain's room, she hurriedly got up and walked outside. While Hinamori Momo was still thinking about how to thank Aizen, she only saw a scene that she could not believe. Hinamori Momo looked at the high wall in front of him, and his whole body trembled. Then a cry of wailing resounded over the entire 5th Division team building. Episode 90. Doubt? Investigation. Hinamori Momo stared blankly at the figure nailed high on the wall, and let out a painful hiss. She would never have thought that Captain Aizen, who talked and laughed with her yesterday, would suddenly die tragically. After a while, several soldiers patrolling nearby also hurried to the scene. When they saw Aizen's body, their eyes widened and their faces were full of shock. "Captain Aizen! How can this be? Vice Captain Hinamori, what is this? What's the matter? Hurry up and report this matter." As time goes by, more and more people also appear at the crime scene. After hearing the news, everyone who came to see this scene couldn't help but breathe in air conditioning. First, Captain Ikamaru was killed in Baidaemon, but now even Captain Aizen is also. I just received the news that Tsuneyayoi's family was completely wiped out and no one was spared. Is there any connection between these? Who is the one who killed Captain Aizen? These things must be related. The murderer is probably a person. Could it be the man in the legend? Hinamori Momo knelt on the ground with dull eyes, tears streaming down her. After hearing the discussion around her, she suddenly seemed to think of something. After wiping 2 tears with her hands at random, she got up and left quickly. "Captain Aizen, I must seek justice for you." Hinamori Momo shook his teeth fiercely and darted away with firm eyes. 12th Division, Technology Development Bureau. Aizen helplessly sat in front of the instrument and sighed softly. Due to so many incidents recently, personnel from the Technology Development Bureau were transferred to participate in patrols. Thinking of the explosion that happened in Maoshiyakin before, he thought of Kuratsuchi Mayuri's reaction at the time. As the deputy director of the Technology Development Bureau, Aizen thinks he still knows Kuratsuchi Mayuri very well. However, he didn't expect that the other party was not only uninterested in this matter, but he still had lingering fears. This also made him more curious and created many sources of confusion. The legendary man. Just when Aizen was in a trance, the instrument in front of him started to flash red. He looked at the 6 white dots and couldn't help but exclaimed, "No. The murderous stone has failed. It's a disaster. This is trouble." After talking, Aizen hurried to Kuratsuchi Mayuri's office. At this moment, Kurosaki Ichigo and others also passed through the enchantment above and entered Surpassing. Read more at mtlarchive.com. Yu Taifeng, who was in the Phoenix Palace, frowned slightly when he felt the abnormal movement in the jingling palace. This is also a question he has been thinking about in the past 2 days. According to the plot in Shinigami's original work, Ichigo and others will use the Yhwach cannon to enter the jingling palace under the leadership of Yurikayuki on the second day they meet Ikamaru Jin. However, after he killed Ikamaru Jin, things seem to have undergone some subtle changes. Ichigo and others did not enter the jingling court according to the time in the original book. The matter between Ikamaru Jin and the Tsuneyashiro family also pointed all the fingers at him. Although all this has no effect on him. But his instinct told him that Aizen might have planned for suspended animation in advance. As for where Ichigo and others will go, he still doesn't know now. But what is certain is that they will find ways to go to the double power station. At that time, Aizen will inevitably appear and take away Hogyoku from Rukia. Thinking of this, Yu Taifeng shook his head helplessly. It seems that he can only watch the changes. The news of Aizen's death once again caused a heated discussion in the 13th Division, and everyone unanimously regarded Yu Taifeng as the murderer. Yu Yhwach, who had just finished the meeting and returned to the 4th Division team house, had a faint suspicion in her heart. Behind Aizen's death, there may be some ulterior conspiracy. As the captain of the 4th Division, she also rushed to the scene at the first time. In order to understand the doubts and happiness, she considers any possibility of existence. However, she was a little disappointed in the result. There is nothing unusual about Aizen's body. This also made Mao Zhihua's doubts deeper. At this time, she couldn't help but think of Yu Taifeng. Because just before leaving the Phoenix Palace last night, the other party had said a profound sentence to her. What the eyes see is not always true. 0. Look for flowers. At this moment, Mao Zhihua felt a sense of crisis inexplicably. Coupled with the various orders issued by Room 46 after Rukia was sentenced to death, the doubts in her heart have increased a bit. Therefore, Wazuhua decided to investigate it personally. For Soul Society and Surpassing, and for the person she has always cared for. From the death of Aizen to the invasion of the travel disaster, today's Surpassing is very lively. After another temporary meeting was over, everyone also dispersed with their assigned tasks. Kayaraku Shunsui and Joshiro Yukitake walked side by side, with a dignified expression on their faces. I was thinking about taking a good afternoon nap, but now it seems that you and I have been busy for a while. Kayaraku Shunsui pressed the hat on his head and said helplessly. Joshiro Yukitake coughed slightly, the solemn expression on his face aggravated. He cast his eyes down and replied softly, Chun Shui, don't you think all of this is a bit strange? Kiki, although that person is back, we don't know his purpose. However, I always feel that it is not he who is pushing the wave behind. After Chun Shui heard Shiro's words, the playful smile on his face slowly disappeared. Then he said in a deep voice, Shiro, are you still thinking about Rukia? But having said that, this time Room 46 didn't even get angry because of that person, but kept Rukia very tight. Are they doing this to kill chickens and become monkeys? It's ridiculous. He is not even afraid of old man Shan, so how can he care about this thing that has nothing to do with him? After Kayaraku Shunsui said these words, he realized that his description just now seemed a little inappropriate. He chuckled awkwardly, and continued to walk forward with Joshiro Yukitake. After leaving the team house of the 1st Division, Wazuhua hurried to the 46 room. Because she wants to start the investigation from there. After a while, Mao Zhihua came to the destination. At this time, a voice full of complex emotions appeared behind her. Captain Winohana, you, why are you here? Enter.